meeting, and so we will call our work session to order. And I see out in the audience we have 3 Boy Scouts, and so if they would come up, I'd like to recognize them. Why don't you come up? And you can just stand right in front with me. I'm Mayor Hill. Good to meet you. We'll have you introduce yourself in just a moment. If you could, introduce yourself with your name and what troop you're with and your sponsoring organization. So go ahead.
My name is Spencer. I'm from Troop 266 and sponsoring organization, I don't know.
Okay. We'll see if number 2 knows.
My name is Daniel Blair. I'm also from Troop 266, and I also don't know the organization.
My name is Ashton. I'm also part of Troop 266, and I also don't know.
Okay. So moms and dads? Okay. Great. Well, we love to have Scouts come and be with us. And so when you do come...
Oh, I got another one.
Okay. If our other one, your name?
Liam Malai,
And troop?
266.
And do you know who your sponsor is?
Where we meet, apparently.
I can't remember. The church?
Okay, good. Co-op ministry here in McMinnville, right?
Yeah,
Just down the street. Well, here's a City of McMinnville pin that you can wear, just to remember that you came to one of our council meetings. Thanks, you guys. Come anytime you'd like. So as we get back to our agenda this evening, we're going to call on Police Chief Matt Scales to discuss our city parking garage and city parking lot code of conduct, and much effort's been put in. So Matt, we'll turn it over to you, and you can give our presentation, then we can have a discussion.
All right, thank you. And Mayor, members of the council, city staff, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you tonight. Maybe this is not going to be a PowerPoint that they do so well over at planning. We're not going to do what Rich did last time and I have nothing. I did want to put my my staff report up because there are some photos and some code of conduct I'd like to discuss as we move forward throughout our discussion tonight. But this has come to light. The city parking structure, city-owned surface lots have been identified as a critical piece of the city's parking supply and the infrastructure, and that was made apparent by Rick Williams Consulting, who completed the comprehensive city-funded parking study late last year. I think we've got it earlier this year. As part of the city's mission, it's to provide a safe and livable community, and this staff report, and as importantly, this work session is conducted with 2 specific purposes in mind. The first being the safety and security of those who utilize the city-owned parking lots and structure. The second is moving on the city moving forward with the recommendations from Williams Consulting that the city needs to ensure that the underutilized aging parking structure needs to support the economic vitality of our downtown and our city. It should come as no surprise to you, and more specifically, the PD, that we continue to receive complaints regarding behavioral issues in the parking structure. These complaints have been sent to staff, members of the council throughout the year, probably the last couple of years. And as importantly, the police department has seen an increase in demand for calls for service at the parking structure, in addition to the misuse of the parking structure that has caused the Public Works Department to be inundated, as we have been, with complaints. Their complaints are having to clean up garbage, human feces, drug paraphernalia on a weekly, if not daily basis. Whether it's criminal conduct or aggressive behavior in the parking structure, the issue remains clear that we, the city, have no rules of conduct for that facility specifically, or the city parking lots. No way to exclude those who are using the parking structure in an unacceptable manner. As we move forward, I hope the information I provide gives you a little context to the problem and maybe some solutions that we can hopefully get some direction on as we move through this tonight. As mentioned above, the city conducted that parking study. It did identify that the city is a top destination city with the bustling and historic downtown, and wine tourism is the backbone. And as such, McMinnville is likely to face new pressures on our parking supply. One recommendation from the parking study was that given the proximity to the Fifth Street parking garage to the downtown core, that it needed upgrading, and it would set a new standard for parking in MAC. The study further suggested that the city explore other options for the parking structure, such as valet or city-required permitting for overnight parking within the structure. All of these recommendations from the parking study are excellent ideas, I think, but first of all, we need to get control of how the current parking structure is being used. It's widely recognized that there is a growing safety and health concerns taking place in the parking structure, and I'm going to walk you through the current state of the structure and provide you with hopefully some solutions. As referenced earlier, over the last couple of years, the parking structure has become a call for service driver for the McMinnville PD, as well as the Public Works Department. We've had dozens of complaints from residents, business owners, employees of the Yamhill County Courthouse, and those who frequent our downtown core using the parking structure to park their vehicles. As I've mentioned, criminal activity from complaints, criminal mischief, drinking in public, use of narcotics, urinating in public, defecation, and sleeping in parking stalls. All these activities have occurred in the parking structure over the years, but never to the degree that we've seen in the last 2 years. I was able to pull information from our computer-aided dispatch. Should note our calls for service, you'll see, have gone up exponentially. Reasons are really twofold. One is obviously an increase in call for service because of the illegal behavior taking place at the structure. But two, staff has been directed to provide checks on these parking structures in response to the increased criminal activity. I think if you would go to our Downtown Safety Task Force webpage, there's a portion within that officer's report that I submit. And over the last 2 to 3 weeks alone, those reports were getting upwards of 20 to 25 calls for service per week in the parking structure alone. That is, in my opinion, not acceptable. As you see, our officers are spending a disproportionate amount of time in the parking structure simply trying to mitigate the issues. In 2016, we had 164 calls for service. In 2017, we had 370. And right now, we're on pace for 390 calls for service. I'd probably guess that we're going to be higher than that. That was taken just about a month ago. And based on our projections, we're basically, if you take a call for services, takes 30 minutes per officer per call. That's almost 12,000 minutes, right at 190 man hours. You would average a cost of about $10,000, close to $11,000 a year just to respond to that brick building. And speaking with the Public Works Department, they've got essentially a 2-year window of data they've tracked. Their data estimates that roughly 7% of an FTE is spent removing the human waste, trash, camping debris, drug debris, abandoned belongings, sleeping bags, etc. That's in excess of their normal routine maintenance of the structure. In addition, they've tracked their cost for service outside of the normal everyday normal maintenance, and they're right at $3,000 in cleanup beyond those normal costs. So I think we've identified the problem. We've repeatedly are seeing the same persons, the same vehicles parking in the structure and causing problems for patrons who wish to use the structure for its intended use. And currently there's no rules of conduct for the city-owned parking structure or the city-owned surface lots. This allows for those repeat offenders to come back to these locations and continue to engage in the repeated unwanted behavior without risk of exclusion. These facts, in addition to the associated costs cause me to believe, and I think you will probably concur, that we're simply chasing our tails right now with no long-term solution to the parking structure use issue and or the surface streets. I believe the parking structure is as a necessary and critical piece of our downtown parking supply, and our citizens and our businesses and those that want to come and visit MAC. But we have to protect it for it and make it used for its intended purpose. So for me, the discussion's fairly simple. Do you want a written code of conduct and ordinance for our city parking structures and surface lots? I've researched codes, thanks to Planning Director Richards and City Attorney Kosh. I have taken a look at this, and this one is from the City of Portland, the one that I came up with. It utilizes the code of conduct, which would authorize myself or my designee to develop and enforce rules of conduct for the parking structure and the surface lots. Any person who fails to comply with the rules of conduct could be excluded for a period of time. And if they would return, there is the possibility of being arrested for criminal trespassing. Secondly, acknowledging the parking study recommendation, do you, the council, want to dive into or explore moving into no overnight parking within the parking structure? I think that's a critical piece. This is not just about behavior in the parking structure. This is also about what our parking study said and where we need to direct to improve what our existing capacity has. Would require setting up a permitting system for residents, businesses who wish to use the parking structure overnight, and require engaging the MDA and local businesses and residents. So I'm going to skip forward, and what I'm asking for is simply an approval to move forward with an introduction of a code of conduct ordinance that will provide us some framework, some guidelines to use for the structure and the city lots for their intended design and use. I've got the code of conduct here. I'd be happy to answer questions. I know there's going to be some from the councilors, and I'd be happy to ask them. In your packet, you have the code of conduct. In the packet, you also have some photos that I've attached, and if you want to scroll through those, I'd be happy to do them here, or you can do them yourself. But let me skip down to kind of what we're seeing. This is an everyday look at the parking structure. Obviously trash and the like. So you get the general gist of what we're talking about and what the Public Works Department's dealing with. The code of conduct is fairly clear and pretty straightforward. It essentially says you come and you use the parking structure for its use, which is to park your car and leave, or coming back to your car and driving away. Obviously, no person's going to be able to violate federal, state, or city laws. That no person shall enter or remain for purposes other than to park or retrieve their vehicle, possess a weapon. These are all sort of kind of like duh factor type of language, but it really does. It needs to be in there. Because as of right now, if we cite somebody under a city ordinance or a crime, they're able to come back under the current situation. So
will this allow us to ban certain people that are consistent offenders for a certain period of time, sort of like what we do with the downtown area?
Right. So not necessarily the downtown area. They'd be banned from the parking structure and or service lots throughout the city.
Okay.
And under the Portland Code, which again, this is just basically pulled straight out of, it's 180 days. Now that person who is excluded has the right to appeal. They could appeal in writing, and during that appellate time, the exclusion does remain in effect, but they could appeal to me and provide some mitigating information as to why it should be reduced, dismissed, what have you. So yes, to answer your question, that would prohibit them from returning.
Yeah, and I'd say it's more similar to the exclusion
Parks.
policy that we have in the parks than from the downtown. Yep.
So how does the code that has been presented to us dovetail with our no camping cars and
Well,
RVs?
it really, the camping within the cars, it does apply to public streets and to city-owned lots. That does work. So it does dovetail and essentially says the camping, not necessarily camping the cars, but abandoned vehicles in the parking structure would be dealt with in the same manner there.
In the same manner as the ordinance that we passed?
Correct.
Okay. And so there's no conflicting approaches with this as compared to our most recent ordinance that we enacted?
No, sir.
Okay.
David?
No conflict. This governs, I'd say, a wider range of behaviors. What you adopted previously just dealt with a particular type of vehicle on city streets and parking lots. This is focused on parking lots exclusively and addresses a much wider range of behaviors and allows, as the chief said, for the same kinds of exclusions that we have for other city properties that are managed either with the library or the parks that if people engage in
Community center, those types of
those type that we already have a exclusion authority on the books related to those locations. This would be to allow a similar type program in place for the parking garage in city-owned or managed parking lots.
So I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead,
Mr.
Wendy.
Mayor. Thank you for this. I know it's been a concern of the citizens for a long time, and of course of the city council as well, and I really like what you've come up with. So thank you so much for the work on it. Had a couple of questions. One is with regards to trash and leaving personal belongings in there. I don't see it addressed specifically. Was the thought that will fall into one of the other categories, but not as directly, or did I miss it? Leaving belongings. I know there's no camping.
The city's offensive littering ordinance or the statute.
So,
Yeah, there is a offensive littering city ordinance that would cover that or prohibit that.
okay.
But you're correct, other than it says camping, sleeping, bathing, that sort of thing, but you're correct.
Could we add something?
certainly could. That
Because
is
of the
not-
pile of things that we saw, that wasn't necessarily camping, but it was leaving their personal property there that was not a vehicle. That might be a loophole.
Yes, that can certainly be something that could be added.
And I had a question about the smoking. Is there any reason why we couldn't just say no smoking? I mean, it says under covered areas, but to make it more clear cut? That might be a question for David.
If it's the council's desire to prohibit smoking anywhere in the parking structure or surface parking lots, you can certainly
So clear
implement that.
that way, you're on the property or you're not. It's not whether or not it's covered.
Okay. That's something that you were interested in seeing?
I am, if
I am
other
too.
councils.
I would be too.
Yeah. Much like our discussion in our downtown area, some of those safety and behavioral issues that we talked about, I think they really dovetail our discussions because, even though we were talking specifically in the downtown core area, I think the parking structure, we did do a little talking. We backed away from that because we didn't feel like it was.
You are correct, Mario. During the safety task force, the parking structure came up specifically as a problem that they'd want to address. And as you recall from the downtown area, there is research being done about a smoke-free 3rd Street. Yeah.
What parking lots on Second here are city-owned?
I believe the one right behind me, I believe the ones that are city-managed is next to Presbyterian. And I believe there's some more down.
Yeah, Timrick and Nickel and
Yep.
1893's building and.
My only thought with the smoke-free parking lots is the point of doing 3rd Street proper for the smoking ban out of Downtown Safety Task Force was that people could go out the back of the Blue Moon or out the back of other businesses to be able to smoke. And now if we put this ordinance in there, it's going to essentially make it no smoking at all downtown.
That would be,
With the back door
that would be,
signage.
yes, you're right, Counselor. That would be something that, as we spoke about in our recommendations that came forward, was smoke-free 3rd, but alleviating or allowing some in the back of a premise, so that could be somewhat problematic. Although parking lots aren't sidewalks, et cetera, so you still have those areas that are utilized behind the businesses, although you'd have to, you've got to be cognizant of the 10 feet rule by state health code for smoking in the area of a door of ventilation, so again, something to think about.
I guess my question would be, would the council want to see that provision focused on the parking garage or on all surface parking lots?
I'd be okay with the parking garage, but I would like to allow businesses to still serve all patrons and not, even though I don't smoke, I just think that there is a demographic in the city that does. So we should keep the 3rd Street proper and just focus on the garage as far as no smoking goes.
Wendy?
I can't
Go ahead.
stand walking into secondhand smoke. I just think that we should allow that flexibility.
Wendy, your thoughts as you brought that up?
I would be in support of all city. I like the idea of having it be really straightforward, but I would be willing to compromise if the rest of the council wanted to focus on. The garage is clearly the one that has the most issues with that, so I don't think we would lose a lot if we just did the garage.
Well, it goes hand in hand with me, the discussions we've had about smoking and loitering. They go hand in hand typically. Other discussion items? Go ahead, Alan.
Just some clarification, Chief. So the photos are eye-opening. I've been down there and seen rubbish and human waste and everything, but these are chilling to me. They pretty much tell a story.
Yes.
That's what's happening down there. And it really affects our city and the environment. And I know we've talked about upgrading that structure, and I'm sure hope we get some money in the budget this year to do things like bring it up to date electrically with lighting, and it could be a cost savings over years, but that would be the major expense. Something else like a slurry seal, a heavy one on the asphalt areas, pressure washing the whole building, and the signage, which is recommended by our consultant, and applying those and getting those done to create more of an uplifting environment, especially the lighting. And I hope we get that in our budget this year. So.
Other comments?
Yeah, I have a couple of other questions. One is with regards to the exclusion zones. Can you just educate me about how the officers that are on duty that come in, how they have access to that on their computers?
Right.
Or,
Okay.
so they can look up and see if somebody's in violation and be able to enforce that.
Okay, are you talking about parking lot
Exclusion-
specific?
For the
or-
in
Okay,
this.
under this, how we do, currently what we do is we provide officers in a drive within the police department computer system access to information about who is and is not excluded from a specific area. That's access throughout our department, so that's how they know who can and can't be there. There's also candidly, there's the face, we know the faces and the names,
Right.
but the computer systems that we do have in our cars have access to all our areas that have exclusions in effect, whether it's the parks, whether it's the downtown exclusion zone through probation, et cetera. So yes, we do have access to that.
And do they have photos with them or something like that? in case
Right
they-
now, the photos are not onto like the parks facilities, but it is to the downtown exclusion area. Yes, we do have photos to those. It's not that difficult. It's very simple to add photos into the computer system to be able to see who is not allowed in a specific area.
Like that would be helpful in case they don't have, they wouldn't have ID or whatever, for them to just be able to face recognition.
Yep.
Thank you. The last question I had was about the permitting for overnight parking. Did you, I don't know if you've done very much research on it yet. Would that involve, how much administration would that involve? And would that also involve some type of way of blocking out non-permitted, or would it be managed by like somebody coming in and making sure there aren't ticket cars that are not permitted? How did you envision that?
That would be the way I would envision it, is somebody that does not have a permit between an hour specified, they could be issued a parking violation, much like downtown is right now.
No expense with the arms or anything like that. It would just be the expense of having the police officer go through and ticket cars that did not have their permits.
That's right. And I did include this. It may behoove us as a community to make the parking structure right before we dive into that other part of the permitting piece. I just wanted to add that in there because it was a part of the recommendation. And if you feel that it's something that we need to look at now, I'd be happy to look at that with the planning director, and we can work with the city attorney's office to see how that works out. But my goal right now is to ensure that the parking structure is a place that people can park.
Yeah. I like the idea of making it, using it to its maximum and filling it with the right kind of uses in the evenings might actually deter, because it's very watched and utilized and not a forgotten place at night. So I think it would behoove us to do that.
I see our discussion today really focusing on the code, so it gives us some clarification and some approach to go. I think we need to have another work session or further discussion about enacting some of the recommendations that came from the parking study that showed that there can be revenue made at that parking structure if we so desire to do that, which would have a ongoing piece to maintain it and keep it looking like a place that people would like to use. And I mean, I look in Salem where a couple of the city-owned lots there that, you use a permit for a portion of it during the day, and so you always have a place to go, and it's very cost, it doesn't cost a lot to do that, but there's revenue then coming in with the number of stalls that we have, and then having an area for visitors, so tourists coming in could possibly be there, and then we're looking at maybe some of the valet services with the overnight. So I think that may be another discussion, but it's something that I really want to look at sooner than later. But I think the code is the number one thing for us to get through tonight. But other discussions?
I have some questions.
Remy?
Like Alan, I part of my thinking goes to kind of the long-term use there, and actually it reminded me of a memo that you sent us years ago about putting in crime prevention through environmental design, and better lighting and things like that, natural crime deterrence, and certainly that onus is not upon you, it's upon us to do those things. And it's I think it's unfortunate that we have the level of problems that we have there, and we really haven't done anything that I'm aware of anyways in terms of crime prevention through environmental design over the last couple of years to start mitigating some of the problems. Some of those things I realize are huge costs, like the lighting would be huge costs, but it sounds like the city is incurring huge costs anyways in call volumes. And then there's also things that we could do that would be relatively low cost, like safe needle disposal, accessibility. When we're very aware we have massive drug problems in the city, that we're not going to be able to pass an ordinance or a code of conduct to get people to stop using drugs, unfortunately. And then, but more specifically to the code of conduct, some of my questions are about the broadness of some of these rules of conduct. So the question is in two parts. One is about the rules in here that are listed that I see as being kind of broad and discretionary, and then the other part is about those that are already very specific and why is there a need for redundancy. So an example of one of the broader rules would be the noise one. I'm not sure which it is, but somebody who should not play music. No person shall play or use amplified or audio equipment at a level that disturbs others. So, that in some ways seems kind of broad, but it also doesn't link necessarily to anything that's in a current ordinance, and so I can see.
Yeah, so we've already
problems.
got an ordinance like that? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying that, we already have, we already limit how much noise an event or a thing can make, and I understand this is more about personal amplification, but it becomes just a judgment call between the person responding and the person doing it, and so without having a real, I'm sorry, I'm not coming up with the word I'm looking for, but there's a lack of clarity. Yeah,
Are we chasing a problem that maybe isn't existing? Is that what you're saying?
Are we creating a code of conduct, or are we putting a rule in place that's rather unenforceable? With
I understand what you're saying.
So,
As the overarching goal of this code of conduct is you're going to your vehicle and leaving, or you're driving into the structure and leaving. I mean, if you're doing anything other than that, you're basically in violation of the code of conduct as it's written.
yeah, so then that brings up some other questions for me. For instance, a lot of people just walk through it, and so then that technically would be a violation of this. Or, somebody that's walking down the street and decides to, and they're not doing anything wrong, there is no criminal activity, but they decide to sit down on the steps and take a rest there because they're tired for 15 minutes, then they're in violation. And so my concern with it is on the enforcement side, in wanting there to be equal enforcement, right?
Correct.
And not to unfairly apply a law, because that's what we're supposed to not do.
Right,
So, so I'm not sure exactly how to frame that question, but a couple of the rules in here, the vagueness of them, or the lack of specificity in them, causes me to pause.
Okay.
So that's one thought. And then the other is, the other arm of that is the redundancy. So, no person shall violate federal, state, or city law. Well,
You do much of these, you're
Right.
violating city, federal, state, and law, yeah.
yeah, and why is there not an enforceability for these things that are listed in here that are already criminal offenses? How is that not enough to make an arrest and move forward? And I understand that the goal is not just to make a singular arrest. I understand that the goal is different than that as this is written, but how is that? How do you see that redundancy kind of coming into play, or why is having something that's already criminal? Why do we need to reemphasize the criminality of it instead of just allowing an arrest to be made if there is criminal activity?
That's a great question, and that can certainly be cleaned up. Again, this was something I pulled from Portland, and if there is redundancy in there, I have noticed that. I'm like, why are they saying you can't damage property? Well, we know you can't damage property because it's criminal. and it's a criminal mischief. So to that degree, I understand that, and that could certainly be cleaned up and tightened up. You ask about the exclusion piece of it. Our downtown exclusion zone does not reach to the parking structure. That's why we are in this sort of no man's land out in the parking structure area.
And how has that worked as a tool for the PD in the downtown core over the last, because it's been about maybe a year or so?
Yeah.
That you've had that exclusion zone?
Yeah, it's worked really well. It has, and I think I testified during our downtown safety task force that we have been able to exclude those bad actors, behaviors, and we have, if you've read the downtown safety task force logs, we have seen a decrease in problematic behavior downtown, and I think that's directly, I would put that parallel to what's going on with our court system right now. In municipal court for those people that are committing those crimes downtown. But again, we're locked into the economic improvement district is our map for that downtown exclusion zone. It does not include the Fifth Street parking structure.
That's all my thoughts for right now.
Okay. Other comments or questions? Go ahead, Kim.
I just would like to comment, although there are some redundancies in here, in view of the fact that there has been such a difficulty with enforcement in this particular area, I personally kind of like the way that it is written. Perhaps some things could use a little bit of cleaning up, but I'm sure that everything that's mentioned here has happened. I've certainly heard loud music coming from the parking structure myself. And personally, it's there for business purpose, not really to be a recreation area. So I kind of like the way that it's written.
And Chief, as you've said so many times before, if we give you a structure, your officers use common sense, but we have to have a structure that allows us to have guidelines.
You're correct, Mayor, and I hope I think I kind of skimmed over your question about our officers. I think use a great deal of discretion. If you've seen a couple walking through the parking structure, we know more likely than not if we're just looking at them and they're just proceeding to walk by, they're not hunkered down in between cars, in between parking stalls. I think we can reasonably ascertain that they're not doing up to what the parking structure is not intended for, but I do understand that, but I would say our officers use a great amount of discretion in understanding.
If I may just for a moment, David, any thoughts that you might have as we look at tightening this? I mean, this is a draft.
Sure.
That has brought some considerations to the table. I'm guessing the next level would to be the go-ahead and then to look at it legally as it pertains to McMinnville through legal eyes between you and the chief, but thoughts that you might have?
Sure. I'm less concerned about being redundant than if we were to be overly vague or overly broad. And so in some of these situations, having a specific reference to a specific activity that's objectionable or not allowed is better than having something that's so broad that it may inadvertently capture in activities that are not objectionable. Having said that also, I don't know that we are well served by simply saying, only you can only be excluded for committing crimes within the parking structure. There may be activity that at some level rises to a crime, but at a lesser level is merely objectionable, offensive, and contrary to the purposes of the operation of the parking garage. And we have a legitimate interest, as any private parking structure operator would have, in regulating activities that occur within that structure. I would hate to put our officers in a position of having to criminally cite somebody into court in order to issue an exclusion for conduct that's not appropriate. There is a process for appeal written into this, so there is a review process available, but at an administrative level, not at a criminal court level. So, and again, that's similar to what we have in the parks system for our park properties.
Yes, I know that at least one person that utilizes the parking structures here, and I think she would say that it's just not always criminal. It's the boisterous catcalling that goes on in there to the females that walk in and out of the structure to get to the courthouse or to work in the surrounding businesses or even the neighborhood. So that's kind of that non-criminal.
C13 would address that, where conduct that disrupts or interferes with the normal operation and disturbs patrons. I think,
Yeah.
and we've heard, many of us have received a number of calls from workers at the courthouse that have complained, and especially in the winter months, they're scared to even go into the structure itself.
Mr. Mayor, can I make one more comment? I also just, in response to the redundancy and things that are captured elsewhere, one of the things that I see with this code of conduct is it's an educational, like a way for us to say what is and is not approved in this particular place. So I personally don't mind the redundancy with something that's found in another place, because we can't expect people to always know, like all of the different things that are not allowed in other places. In this one place, we want you to use it to park. And all of these other things are not that. And so for me, I would rather see that listed in there so that we can, educate people in one spot instead of expecting people to know, to gather from all these different places things that are not allowed to do. It's kind of also us saying, this is how we want it to function. And so anyway, I don't mind that redundancy personally. I like the idea of making it clear so it's easier to, educate people and enforce for our officers. So that's my perspective.
Any further discussion or comments? Go ahead, Adam.
Definitely like the way it's written right now. The only thing I could think of is, I'd like to talk about in Downtown Safety Task Force with the parks code of conduct, is just how long some of it is, and if you clean it up at all to make it more straight and to the point. But I'm fine with the redundancy, because I'd much rather somebody get an exclusion from one specific area than a criminal citation. I think that's quicker for all parties involved.
Agree.
Okay. Well, we've had good dialogue tonight, and I'll just summarize. I think we've given some good feedback to the chief. He's taken notes. My sense is that as a council, we want to move forward with this, and if there's any additional refining and inclusions of things that we've talked about, I think bring that back to us. Have city council look at that. But if just by a raise of hands, anyone not willing to move forward on this?
Did we?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, did we need to give clear directive with regards to the smoking in surface lots or not in surface lots? Do you need more? Because we kind of talked about it, but we never really decided.
What I heard was that you're comfortable with the parking structure, and that as sort of a trade-off, understanding that the smoke-free downtown pieces that we'll probably right now hold off on, and the inclusion of the city lots off of Third or other city lots, just focus on the parking structure.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
I agree, yeah.
Yep.
So, Chief, I think, thank you for the presentation and for the hard work that you and the staff have put together. And so I think move forward and bring it back to us as quickly as you can put that together and bring it back in an ordinance form to us. Okay?
Will do, thank you. I'll get it done.
Thank you, Chief. And that concludes our work session this evening. We have 1 minute to spare, so if anyone needs to just stand up and before we go into our regular council meeting. Okay, it is 7 o'clock, and I would like to call to order the May 8th, 2018 City Council meeting. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and Council President Kelly Menke will lead us in that. Thank you, Kelly. Again, we welcome those that are in attendance this evening to City Council, recognizing that we have two modes of recording this through KCLY, KYCL in their streaming, and MCM. And so our proceedings can be viewed on their websites and their YouTube pages. That takes us to our public comment portion of our meeting this evening. I would like to announce that if there's anyone that wishes to speak on the personal services agreement contract related to Apron Rehab Project, please hold your comments to later in the agenda when we're going to be addressing that topic, and then we'll let you speak then as a part of our discussion. Now, we will allow anyone to speak on a topic other than a topic that's already on the agenda, a matter in litigation, quasi-judicial land use matter, or a matter scheduled for a public hearing at some future date. We allow 3 minutes for dialogue, and we have comment cards back there. And Melissa, have you received any this evening?
Mr. Mayor, I have a question. What would be the correct time during this meeting to bring up an item for new business?
Just something that we want to bring to the...
Something I'd like to bring to the attention of the council.
Maybe at our reports.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have Jacob Miller. Jacob, if you'd like to come and address the council.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Good to see you.
It's good to see you guys as well. Well, I'd like to speak on a concern. It's kind of on topic of code of conduct. And the code of conduct I'm talking about has to do with officers' code of conduct. And
could you pull the mic a bit closer to you?
Is that better?
Yeah.
It has to do with code of conduct that I'd like to speak about tonight, and the code of conduct of officers and McMinnville police officers, to be precise, and kind of the continued role that I see the chief not playing, keeping the peace in that department. So one of the things that I'd like to bring forward is there's been an increased enforcement with lots of officers, as read in the paper, but it's a little bit different than what the paper reads. And what I would bring forth as a code of conduct kind of an issue is antagonistic or agitating type behavior, things that I think people of an official capacity shouldn't be doing. And that I think it could be brought to the council's concern, because I think that you guys would be ones held liable in the long run, because they keep trying to get you to make the rules so they can go out and enforce them. So that being said, one of the things that I'd bring up there is officers, I've been accused of being confrontational myself, and I'd like to speak on that too. One of the things is, that I wanted to bring up is when officers came to my RV and were caught unlawfully searching my vehicle. And when they were caught doing that, I confronted them. I mean, it's somebody doing something like that. That type of action brings forth a confrontation. Hey, what are you doing? I need to start recording this. I need to do something about this. This is wrong. That kind of led to a next step when I asked the officer the questions. Hey, can I get your official identification? I want to know who your direct supervisor is. Things like that. Those things weren't answered. But what did happen was more armed officers came the next time. And that time, we did another thing that was antagonistic, and that's my opinion. That was spray painting people's private property, their cars, from the ground all the way up to the center of the wheel. Okay, and I think those type of actions, again, very antagonistic, and those type of things would bring forth a confrontation. Okay, if I were to go and spray paint your car, you would confront me about that if you saw me do it. I mean, that's reasonable for you to do that. But it's unreasonable for people in an official capacity that are sworn to uphold an oath to protect people's rights to be violating them. We look to these people and we look to you to be an example, to be there and protect us, okay, and protect our rights. And I think that that's the job of the police officers there to kind of help in that. And so those are kind of two examples that I have of confrontations that did happen. And the agitation, I think the main agitator would have been the department in the way that they chose to go about doing that. And that, well, you know, that leaves me to move forward with a couple other things that I was thinking about. I jotted down a few notes this time that when I'm protecting my rights of an unlawful intrusion thereof, I might get defensive and I might seem confrontational, but that's not because I'm not doing my job. I am, but somebody else that is sworn to do that job isn't. They're supposed to be there to do that, and that's not what they're doing. That they're agitating, and and there was more presence, not more presence just to trainees. Two sergeants, one side of the street to the other side of the street. Like a perimeter to come in. It was very interesting. We got it all recorded. If you'd like to see it at some point in time, probably will. So that's kind of that type of code of conduct my wife has said before, ethical type of behavior. I think that there's some stuff that should be done about that. Maybe that you guys as a council might want to take note in. And I'm probably running out of time, so I also want to let you guys know that this stuff goes back pretty far when it comes down to me and the now acting chief. And I would like that. I'd like you guys to know that. I mean, this is going into conspiring against rights here and deprivation of rights on a regular basis instead of protecting of them. I'm really concerned about that. I'm concerned for what might come of that.
Your 3 minutes are up.
Oh, thank you, Jacob. Thank you. Blessings, guys.
Okay. And we have Sean Rollins. Sean, if you'd 3 minutes to address the council. Welcome.
Welcome. My name's Sean Rollins. I clean up this parking structure for the pressure washing. And when we do the pressure washing, we have to use SARS protocol, bunny suits, eye protection, bleach, the whole 9 yards. We donate a lot of that cost to the city of McMinnville, just because our office is down on 5th. So it is a severe problem. I'm more interested in the health problems of it. I highly recommend putting cameras up. I think that would help you guys out a lot. I have no problem with my security company, with the police department, will volunteer and do a couple of sweeps through a night to identify people who are sleeping there. What I'm going to run into problems with, though, is half of the people in the parking structure now are people who have trespassed off other properties. So pushing them around is not working. We need something done. I have no idea. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what the laws are. I just know what the laws are that associate with me and my security companies and my drivers. We do not want to harass these people. We are not police officers, all right? They respond to us pretty well, because if they have wants or warrants, they'll leave because they don't want us to call the cops. And 9 out of 10 times, they're not confrontational when we ask them to leave. They just pack up their stuff and leave, all right? But what I'm running into problems with is their level of frustration is getting high, and I'm getting more and more bad vibes from them, especially the RV parkers. Knocking on somebody's RV at 2 o'clock in the morning is nerve-wracking. You don't know how they're going to be reacting, and I do everything we possibly can not to call the police, because number one, they're busy, and number two, it sets a bad precedent. So I would just like you guys to think about that What are we going to do with these people once we push them out of the parking structure? Is there anything you guys can do with mental health? We have severe psychotic cases that nobody knows what to do with them. I mean, the police don't want to take them. The jail is not a psych ward, you know, and it's just uncomfortable. And I know these people have rights. They really do have rights. You know, these are your citizens, homeless or not. City council, you're supposed to be looking out for everybody. And I just wish you would consider that.
Thank you, Sean. Anyone else like to address the council? Thank you. Charlene O'Brien.
Caroline, I'm
Or
not
Caroline.
My handwriting is
Thank you.
kind of sad there. Sorry I'm late. My name is Caroline O'Brien. I live at 1591 Southwest Wright Street here in McMinnville, Oregon. So I had been here before to talk about an incident that happened in the library on the 22nd of April. And it was one of the reasons why I came here to talk about it. In the time since then, I've been trying to figure out how this problem slipped through whatever the safety net is. A fellow committed a hate crime in the library, threatened women. His statement was to the librarian, yeah, it's loud. She'd asked him to lower his voice. So he said, yeah, it's loud, bitch. I'm going to knock some women up. I don't mind knocking women up. Now, had he said something along the lines of, yeah, it's loud, queer, I'll knock homos up, we'd know, oh, he's a violent homophobe, he's dangerous, he's committing a hate crime. But for some reason, because he threatened women, this is not considered a hate crime, because I've been trying to find out how to get this guy charged. I've talked to the officer who told me to talk to the parole officer. I called the parole officer. She never saw my statement, says she never received it. She said to go back and talk to the officer, who was very kind. He said, I totally understand your point of view, but he said it's kind of a free speech Second Amendment thing. And I thought, well, it's still a guy threatening women in general. The next day after this happened, some guy in Toronto drove his car onto a curb and killed women because he was angry at them. So if a guy commits a hate crime, or if a person commits a hate crime, there needs to be some way to figure out for a citizen to be able to do this and at least file a complaint or a charge so that this guy doesn't do something worse. Because if you let it keep going, I'm telling you, that guy who killed the women in Toronto, there were red flags before that happened, and nobody caught it when the red flags were there. So I'm just telling you, there's some kind of there's a hole in the system, and I'm falling into it. I'm going to go back and talk to the officer again tomorrow, and I guess give him an updated statement, but I don't know what else to do. This fellow was arrested twice between then and now. He's currently being held again. I talked to the parole officer and asked the parole officer, how does this guy keep getting out? He's been arrested something like 25 times in 5 years. And she said, well, I have a grid, and then we kind of go by the grid as far as what's happened, will he offend again, what are the circumstances? And I said, so will he offend again for those previous charges? Because if he's never been charged for hate crime, then of course they can't judge by that. And she said, well, you'd have to check and find out his computerized criminal history, which I'm in the process of getting, but I have to get it from Salem. And of course, there's a fee, which I have to pay the fee to get the report to figure out what's going on. No citizen should have to go through this. That's why we have a government and a police department and management and administration. So I'm just letting you know there are holes in the system. I've fallen into it. I'll follow up again when I find out more. But if I've fallen into the hole and I can read and write and draft my statement, what about people who don't know how the process works and don't know where to get help and, quite frankly, don't know how to phrase it in a statement in a written letter? Dangerous people out there. I'm just letting you know it's a red flag. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Any other comments? Okay. Thank you. Is that Jerry?
Lynn Green Lopez, and I
Okay.
would like to know what you do when you have a silent stalker. I would like to know what you do when you have a stalker pushing you around that you can't identify and who is silent. May it be a town, a person, or a computer, or back again to a town. What do you do? Where do you go? And how do you get help for that? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yeah, you've already used your 3 minutes, but you can come next time, Jacob, and, okay? This evening, we have a number of proclamations, and so I will come here, and I'd like to our first proclamation is going to be the National Public Works Week, and so Mike and the engineering department, if we could have you come up and.
Thank you, Mayor. The several engineering staff are here tonight that are going to join you at the dais.
Okay. Come on. This is a group that I see often. Roy? Our proclamation of National Public Works Week, which is May 20th through the 27th of 2018. Whereas this year, the American Public Works Association and communities nationwide are celebrating the 58th Annual National Public Works Week, and this year's theme is the power of public works. And whereas, because of public works, we are able to have clean water, safe streets, parks, buildings, well-functioning sanitation, sewers, and reliable power, all of which are vital importance to the health, safety, sustainability, resiliency, and economic well-being of our community. And whereas the employees of McMinnville Water and Light, the employees of the city's engineering, public works, and wastewater departments demonstrate the power of public works in our community every day by advancing the quality of life for all of its citizens. Whereas it is in the public interest for the citizens, civic leaders, and children of McMinnville to understand the importance of public works and public works services in their lives. Now, therefore, I, Scott A. Hill, Mayor of the City of McMinnville, do hereby proclaim the week of May 20th to 27th, 2018 as National Public Works Week in the City of McMinnville, and I call upon all citizens, business leaders, civic organizations to acquaint themselves with the issues involving in providing, maintaining our public works infrastructure, and to recognize the contributions that our public works employees make every day for the quality of our lives. In witness thereof, I here to set my hand and cause the official seal of the City of McMinnville to be attached this, the 8th day of May, 2018. Signed, Scott A. Hill, Mayor of the City of McMinnville. Thank you. Before we give this proclamation, something that we love to do, okay, is celebrate the power of public works. Wednesday, May 23rd, we're going to be at McMinnville Water and Light for our annual barbecue lunch at noon. And so I look back to each and every one of you. If you've not had this opportunity, it's on my calendar, okay? And it's a lot of fun because we all walk away with a door prize, don't we? Usually. Okay. Well, some people do, okay. But again, thank you. And take it back to the whole group as you see them. Absolutely. Thanks. Roy. Thank you. Thanks, you guys. We next have National Police Week, and so Chief Scales, if you would come up, and anyone from your department, it'll just be you and me. Our proclamation. Whereas the Congress and the President of the United States has designated May 15th as Peace Officer Memorial Day and the week in which the May 15th falls as National Police Week, whereas the members of law enforcement agency of McMinnville play an essential role in safeguarding the rights and the freedoms of McMinnville, and whereas it is important that all citizens know, understand their duties, responsibilities, hazards, and sacrifices of their law enforcement agency, and that members of our law enforcement agency recognize their duty to serve the people by safeguarding life and property, by protecting them against violence, disorder, and by protecting the innocents against deception and the weak against oppression. And whereas the men and women of the law enforcement agency of McMinnville increasingly provide a vital public service, now, therefore, I, Scott A. Hill, Mayor of the City of McMinnville, do proclaim May 13th through the 19th, 2018, as National Police Week, and call upon all the citizens of McMinnville and upon all civic or patriotic, civic, educational organizations to observe the week of May 13th through 19th, 2018 as Police Week, with appropriate ceremonies and observances in which all people may join in commemorating law enforcement officers, past and present, who by faithful and loyal devotion to their responsibilities have rendered a dedicated service to their communities, and in doing so have established themselves in an enviable and enduring reputation for preserving the rights and the security of all citizens. I further call upon all citizens of McMinnville to observe May 15th as Peace Officer Memorial Day in honor of those law enforcement officers who through their courageous deeds have made the ultimate sacrifice in service to their communities or have become disabled in the performance of duty. And let us recognize and pay respect to the survivors of our fallen heroes. In witness thereof, I have herefore set my hand and caused the official seal of the City of McMinnville to be affixed this the 8th day of May, 2018, and signed by Scott A. Hill, Mayor of the City of McMinnville. Chief. Chief talked to us many times on a number of subjects, but just commemorating and doing this, just a few words, if you would.
Well, I wish our men and women of the PD could be here. This week, today I just attended the Salem, down at our state police academy, the memorial, and when you hear upwards of 180 men and women that have given their lives, the ultimate sacrifice for everybody, for those they serve, I truly appreciate the council and staff and citizens, their support of our police department. And without you, we wouldn't be here, obviously. Unfortunately, we don't have a barbecue, but we're giving free ride-alongs. So at any rate, thank you again. We appreciate your support.
Thank you, Chief, and take our words of encouragement and thank you back to the guys and gals. Okay. Our next proclamation this evening is National Preservation Month, and Chuck, if you'd come up and I'll present one of the driving forces of historic preservation in our city. Whereas the National Trust for Historic Preservation, a nonprofit dedicated to protecting America's historic buildings, landscapes, and neighborhoods, established an annual celebration of historic preservation across the country. And whereas this celebration, known as National Historic Preservation Month, was first established and observed by the National Trust for Historic Preservation in 1973, and whereas the National Historic Preservation Month is now observed in the month of May day every year throughout the country. And whereas the city of McMinnville has a rich history as a primary social economic center of Yamhill County region, and whereas the McMinnville Downtown Historic District, the economic center of our city, focused on 3rd Street, is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And whereas the city of McMinnville protects its historic buildings and sites through a locally adopted historic resources inventory managed by the Historic Landmark Committee, which includes well over buildings and sites dating back to 1853. Whereas the protection of our historic resources enhances the economic vitality of our community, beautifies and builds environments, and instills in our community members a sense of pride in the historic importance of the city of McMinnville. Now, therefore, I, Scott A. Hill, Mayor of the city of McMinnville, do hereby proclaim May 2018 as Historic Preservation Month in the city of McMinnville, and I urge all citizens to celebrate Historic Prevention Month and support efforts to protect our valued historical resources throughout the city. In witness whereof, I hereby set my hand and cause the official seal of the city of McMinnville to be affixed this, the 8th day of May, 2018. Signed, Scott A. Hill, Mayor of City of McMinnville. Chuck? Planning department is a part of this, but you also have a committee that is regularly meeting, and we're going to even add a member to that tonight. But just any thoughts that you might have?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Our committee does meet regularly, monthly. This month they're meeting a couple of extra times. They're doing a training, and then we also have a public meeting coming up for the Historic Preservation Plan process that we're working on. That's coming up on May 23rd, so if anyone's interested and available, you're invited to come to that. We'll also be sharing some information this month to celebrate Historic Preservation Month on our new-ish social media accounts. We'll be sharing some photos and stories of historic properties around town, so watch for those too.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chuck. It's always a joy to be able to have proclamations and recognize so many of the good things that are happening within our community. This evening, we have a consent agenda, and we're looking at an added item to that, but consider resolution number 2018-21, a resolution, yes. That's a part of it, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. A resolution appointing Heather Sheridan to the Historic Landmark Committee. And so I would ask any counselor if they would like to have any item removed off of the consent agenda. Hearing none, then I'll take a motion.
I so move.
Second.
It has been moved by Kelly and seconded by Remy. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? This resolution passes unanimously this evening. That moves us to resolution number 2018-20, a resolution awarding the personal services agreement contract for environmental design and bidding services to the Apron Rehabilitation Project 2017-10. I'll call on Community Development Director Mike Bissett to present. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I'll refer you to the brief staff report that's in your packet by Engineering Manager Rich Wofford. Included with that staff report is the resolution that's before you this evening, as well as copies of a personal services contract with Century West Engineering, including their proposed scope and fee, and our project vicinity map of this project, which includes the next amount of work that the FAA is going to fund at the airport and our airport improvement plan. It's a representation as noted in the resolution, the cost of their contract for this phase of work is $276,205. And unless there are any questions, staff would recommend that you adopt the resolution.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions or discussion among council for Mike? Adam?
When, I know this is just design right now, but when is this work anticipated, like next construction season, or?
The way the grant funding is working and the plan is for construction to occur after July 1 of 2019, so a little over a year from
Okay. And the airport's fully functional right now from the last construction project, yeah? The runway is up and going?
now. The runway is open, the navigation, the FAA navigation is yet to be turned on, the grading that needs to be finished once areas are dry and the soil can be compacted, has to be completed so that they open their flight check and turn on ILS navigation. But the runway is open.
Thank you. If there's no other questions, I'd make a motion to approve this personal services contract.
So any other questions or comments? Hearing none, it has been moved that we approve Resolution 2018-20. Do I hear a second? It has been moved by Adam and seconded by Alan. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, signify by saying nay. This Resolution 2018-20 passes unanimously. That moves us to our ordinances this evening, and we now will consider the matter of ordinance number 5052. Does any councilor object to having the ordinance read by title only? Not hearing any. We'll have the city attorney have the second reading of ordinance 5052 by title only. David?
This is the second reading of ordinance number 5052, an ordinance amending Title 17 zoning of the McMinnville City Code specific to Chapter 17.06 and Chapter 17.62 to update definitions and the regulation of non-conforming signs.
Any council discussions? Hearing none, I'll ask for any public comments. Oh, we're not doing public comments, okay? So let's then go, I'll ask for a motion to adopt ordinance number 5052.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Sal, and it's been seconded by Kelly. We'll ask the city recorder to poll the council.
Councillor Drapkin?
Aye.
Councillor Garvin?
Aye.
Councillor Peralta?
Aye.
Councillor Rudin?
Aye.
Councillor Stassens?
Aye.
Council President Minke?
Aye.
Ordinance 5052 is adopted by a vote of 6-6. Thank you. That takes us to our reports from councilors on committee and board assignments. And so, Adam, I'll start with you.
I got an email today that our YCOM meeting will be canceled this Thursday due to lack of quorum, and so we'll finalize the budget next month in June, and that's looking at a 3% increase, and other than that, I think that kind of wraps it up.
Thank you, Adam. Sal?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the first meeting that I'll be attending of the Council of Governments will be happening this month, I believe. I also wanted to take a moment to bring up an item of new business that has been discussed in the homelessness subcommittee. I'd like to suggest that we bring forward the legal framework for permitted RV overnight camping and overnight sleeping that's been under consideration by that task force, the one based on the Eugene Springfield model. I realize that we have not fleshed out all of our partners right now, but I don't think there's any reason to not bring forward at least the legal framework that would enable that program from taking place. I've brought this issue up in that task force, and as the mayor knows, and city manager and council president knows, I've also brought that up with them about 3 weeks ago. So I have an email today that I'll be sending to other members of the council with a draft that is really essentially just the Eugene ordinance with a few changes for to make it McMinnville specific, but I'm bringing that up as an item for discussion and consideration by members of the council and other interested staff and parties.
Thank you, Sal.
May I so at the, not to go out of turn, but relevant to what you just said, at the last homeless subcommittee, that program was launched out of subcommittee and moved to the Affordable Housing Task Force, which met, and with knowledge of that recommendation or idea, the Affordable Housing Task Force is moved that idea along, and so staff is drafting an ordinance that will be coming before the council with the recommendation of the Affordable Housing Task Force, which is kind of the parent committee to the homeless subcommittee. So,
thank you. I'll withdraw the suggestion, and thank you for taking care of it, and others on that task force.
Thank you, Sal. I think I'll move down to Alan.
Yes, we had a nice meeting last week, I believe, concerning the awards of historic preservation projects in McMinnville. There were 3 applicants, and we recognized all 3 of them. They were great projects. On that panel was Joan Drapkin, the chair of the committee, myself, Heather Richards. There was one other. Oh, Chuck, of course. Yeah, Chuck's there every day. And so it was beautiful to see these projects, and we're familiar with all of them in town. And we should see more of those to come as historic preservation becomes more in the forefront of our lifestyles here in McMinnville as a growing, developing community, that we're going to see good things happen in the way of preservation of old things that are worthwhile. So that's about it.
Thank you, Alan. Remy?
other than what I just said in response to Sal, our next meeting is Monday the 14th, I believe, for the homeless subcommittee. That's at 4 o'clock p.m. For anybody that would like to attend.
Thank you, Remy.
This is Monday.
Wendy?
So we had the lunch on Alpine. We had, a lot of us were there. We had great turnout. When I left probably a little after 1:30. There were still tons of people there, and a lot of people that were not involved in the project, that were just citizens that wanted to come check it out. So I would say congratulations to everybody who put that together. It was a great success, and I had a lot of good conversations. And Heather was telling us in our urban renewal meeting that the number one question she's getting is, what are the next things that are planned? And so that's a lot of people want to see more stuff happening down there, which is great. So we had a conversation about that during the urban renewal advisory committee meeting that we just had last Wednesday, and thought maybe we should put together something that we can give out to people who want to have events there, kind of get our act together with regards to that, so that other community members can put together events that we can have down there. We also, in the Urban Renewal Advisory Committee meeting, we looked at 2 facade improvement grants, and both of them were cool projects. Both of them were approved by the committee. And we also talked about an idea to put together a targeted building improvement program to try to encourage in a more strategic way encourage more work to be done on Alpine now that the street work is done of private property owners down there. There are a number of sales coming through, and there are also existing people who are down there that could benefit from having some facade improvements or some type of construction work. So if we could encourage that, we can keep the momentum going down there. So we're starting to work on a design for something like that. We're thinking a certain period of time that, like, if you apply within this period of time, there's this really attractive match or something like that. So we sent Heather away with some ideas from us, and she's going to put something together and bring it back to us. So you guys might be seeing that come before you. Then we just had a really brief update on, we talked about the connectivity between downtown Northeast Gateway. No conclusions on that, but we're trying to figure out for the wayfinding how that connection happens. So there's still more conversation to be had with regards to that. No conclusions reached. And then wayfinding and first and second updates, and our next meeting is the first Wednesday of next month. So 4 o'clock at the planning building. So
Thank you, Wendy. Council President Menke?
Well, I haven't been terribly visible for the last couple of weeks, so I'm going to defer to the city manager here and the mayor because they attend a number of meetings that I attend, and let them update you.
Thank you, Kelly. And she did have a good trip to Japan, and we'll need to ask her more about that. Just some thoughts. Last week through MEDP, we had a Humanity of Technology, and we had over a half a day of bringing some VIPs and going out to TTR and having an opportunity to tour their facility. For some of us, this is multiple times that we've been out there. But the one thing that was just so interesting to me is they moved into their building out on the far side of the Evergreen campus under a year ago, and they were concerned that they would be able to use all of their space, and they're already needing to expand. It's just amazing, the growth. And this is a software development company for tax and opinions that go along with tax. It was just amazing tour that we had. Then we moved over to Linfield College, where we had a panel discussion on the advancement of technology and how it's going to play a greater role in communities and states in the country. And again, we had some very knowledgeable speakers come in. We had 3 individuals that had graduated from Linfield that came back and talked to us. One of them that was working with Google and working on the autonomous cars and the movement of those. And so it was just a really interesting afternoon. I think we had well over 70 individuals that came to the presentation, and then we had networking opportunities after that. We also had a visit McMinnville, and again, as they continue to have great successes, talking about the free publicity that we get when we invite people here and show them the uniqueness of McMinnville, and then they go back and write stories nationally about who and what McMinnville is all about. We put some of the finishing touches on our budget process, and they will be coming to us very shortly with their upcoming budget and bringing that to council so that we can take a look at that. But again, moving truly in the right direction, being able to utilize the expertise and the passion that that committee has. And then our bypass committee met, and again, we had a representative from ODOT come out and share with us that the language that the Senate changed that allows us to use the funding that we received for preparing for shovel readiness, so it doesn't earmark any of the money to any specific. It's where we need to have that. So we're making plans. We're looking at those types of things. We're utilizing our lobbyists to keep our interest at hand, both statewide and nationally. So we've got some good things happening from that perspective. And I think that was it for me. Chief, we'll go to the department heads.
Yeah, just a couple items. Just where we're at with some people in the academy. We have 3 officers that are at the police academy right now. They're in various stages of their training. We did get one back from the academy, Elijah Carrillo. We are happy to report that he won the top academic student there for his class. So we've got a bright one. In addition, I don't know if I've reported out, but we've been really busy. We hired and or assigned different people, or promoted. One being Sergeant Steve McCartney is a sergeant. He was promoted last month. One of our canine handlers left for Bend PD, and we've since identified a new handler. He's been training, and he has been certified through the Canine Association, so we've got that asset back on the road. And in addition, this last Saturday, we had our Guns and Hoses Awards banquet between the PD and the fire. And I would like to just recognize there were 4 really outstanding awards. I will tell you that Tim Height was awarded the Life Saving Award for his actions on late December of 2017, where he pulled somebody that was attempting or about ready to jump off the 3 Mile Lane Bridge. He was on the outside of the bridge, was able to pull him back. He received the Life Saving Award. Amy Kepler was awarded the Employee of the Year. Sergeant Josh Sheets was named the Supervisor of the Year. And Taylor Wynn, who's also a full-time student at Linfield, was awarded the Volunteer of the Year. And what's interesting about Taylor is that, like I said, she's a full-time student, but still has 200 to 300 hours of volunteer work at the PD. And she's quite the artist, by the way. So those are 4 people that I'd like to mention. That's it.
Thank you, Chief. Heather? Melissa? David?
I was going to ask Heather if she could talk a little bit about urban renewals plans for the parking garage.
There was some discussion tonight about ensuring that we have budgeted some funds for improvement for the parking garage for next year. The McMinnville Urban Renewal Advisory Committee worked with staff on a budget recommendation for the budget committee for urban renewal funds, and it does include enough funds to do all of the recommended improvements that are in the parking study at the garage, which includes lighting, pressure washing, improving the signage, those types of improvements that you discussed tonight. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that. You should see that in the role of the budget committee in the future.
I have nothing further.
Thank you, David. Jeff?
So you've just heard the budget message for the urban renewal budget. We'll make next Wednesday's budget meeting that much shorter. You and the budget committee will be convening next Wednesday at 6 o'clock in this room to consider the fiscal year 18-19 budget for the city and the urban renewal agency. Look forward to that. And in another fun note, the Farmers Market started their seasonal early this year, Thursday of last week. I was not able to attend since I was out of town. I hope some of you were able to be there. Whether you were there or not, you may not know that it was the single most busy day in the history of the McMinnville Farmers Market. So they've started this season off with a record day. And so we want to thank all the participants and our partners at MDA for putting that market on. That's all I have for tonight.
Thank you, Jeff. Any final words from anyone?
I have one final word. This relates to the Granary District. There is going to be a fun run there on June 2nd. hosted by the Sheridan Japanese School, which is the group that provided the taiko drummers for the performance a couple of weeks ago. If people could, who enjoy running or walking, would like to come out and support that, that would be wonderful. Thanks.
Thank you, Sal. Hearing none else, we will go ahead and close this meeting of the City Council.